USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review podcast, being recorded October 21st, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. Jim, a great weekend of hockey. Why don't we get started out with last weekend's game of the week? That had North Dakota at Minnesota State, a 4-4 tie on Friday and a win for the homestanders on Saturday.
Yeah, Minnesota State, I don't know if you want to say feels lucky to get 3 points out, but they certainly had to rally on Friday night from 2 goals down, and then they had to play a squeaker on Saturday night. North Dakota, if anybody should have any feelings about that, they might feel that they should have had more out of a weekend. And that's kind of the rub of things sometimes, is that you play good hockey and you just make a few mistakes, and next thing you know, what could have been at least 3 points for North Dakota, they're going back with just a singles tie, and there's probably a little bit of frustration on that part. But you're looking at Minnesota State. This is a team that just keeps solidifying itself and kind of cementing the fact that they are a top 2 team right now. At worst, a top 5 team as the season goes on. They are a very good hockey team. Be interested to see when they get into the WCHA and what happens there. But this is a team that ran away with the WCHA last year. They could do that again this season.
Well, as we talk about teams with a great start, you've got to look at Denver, 4-0 on the road before they came back home, and then a sweep this weekend of Boston College, 3-0 and 6-4.
Yeah, and everything about that, just shows how solid this team is. They found ways to win the game. First night it was on defense, and their goaltender, Magnus Krona, he's now 6-0 on the season. I think he's leading the nation, or he's near the top in shots faced. He's making a lot of saves, but 6-0. He gets the shutout on Friday night. Really, that was a 1-0 game with 2 empty net goals. But then found a way to win Saturday night, made a couple of big saves. BC, fell behind and then kept coming back and rallying, and it was kind of in doubt until the final minutes. But I love the way that Denver's playing right now, and they finally get home after a couple of weeks on the road, and they do what they're supposed to do at home. They take the number 6 team into their building and walk away with 2 victories, send Boston College back, kind of questioning a little bit of what's going on, but this is a very good Denver team. And there really hasn't been a bad Denver team in recent years. When you get to think about, they're a couple of years removed from a national title, and even in the last 2 seasons, they've been one of the most steady teams in the country. This is a very, very good Denver team. Boston College, they're probably going to go back to the drawing board a little bit. I think that they know that they're a good club. They just weren't finding the goals at the right time this weekend. But they've got a lot to be hopeful for. I would not, they might fall down in the poll a little bit, but this, to me, doesn't really indict them for not being as solid as we kind of all believe they are.
And you mentioned goaltending. That was a question for Denver with Philip Larson turning pro. Doesn't seem like they've lost a step at all.
No, and just watching Krona play, he was very solid. I got to see the entire Saturday game, and in a game where a goaltender gives up 4 goals, for me to say, wow, he was really solid, shows just how good he was. And he's when you have that leader, you just need that, and when you look at his numbers, through the first 3 weeks of the season, basically, he's right there. He's one of the top goaltenders. Like I said, the number of shots he's facing is pretty high at this point. I think it's 146 saves he's made in his 6 games. He's got a 930 save percentage of 183, goals against average. Already posted 2 shutouts. So I like everything about what's happening there in Denver. And, sure, a freshman, you got to sometimes worry as the season goes on. Do they wear out? Is it a little bit too much? But if he can play as well as he did this weekend, this is going to be one of the most dangerous teams in the country all year.
Speaking of dangerous teams, Tony Granato's got to think that his Wisconsin Badgers are pretty dangerous. They had a sweep over the weekend of Minnesota Duluth and already off to a hot start. Cole Caulfield, Alex Turcotte, and Owen Lindmark with 12 goals among them, Caulfield with 6 of them. This is the year for the Badgers to make some noise because they may not have these guys after this season.
Yeah, we've mentioned that before, and yeah, that's an issue. And I hope everybody didn't want to take Cole Caulfield's temperature after Saturday's game because he didn't score 2 goals because he'd done that every other game. What a great start for the rookie. Obviously, everybody in that team that is supposed to be chipping in, they're doing a very good job. You mentioned Turcotte; he's got 8 points at this point. Caulfield, he's scoring. They're finding ways to win. Weisenbach, he's got 7 assists on the season already. A lot of guys on this team, 2 points a game or more. That's pretty impressive. I think that we knew kind of Wisconsin had some ability. You see the voters in the polls still probably not giving them the respect yet. They're not. They probably still after today won't be a top 10 team, but they're moving in the right direction, and everything that they're doing right now seems to be working. They shook off that season opening loss against Boston College, and since then they've really been rolling. And I saw Minnesota Duluth a week ago, and we know that they're a 2-time national champion, defending national champion, and I know their abilities, and they've definitely proved it to me when I saw them. And the reality is that they just got swept by a team that I'm not sure if they're better, but they're darn close. And we're going to see, these are 2 teams we're going to see down the stretch. We know it. Even though it is a little bit of a slow start for Minnesota Duluth, we're going to see that team, right in the national picture at some point. But at the same time, Wisconsin, Bob, watch out for them. The Big Ten, if anybody thought that, I think some people had picked them around 4th in the Big Ten, that could be a team that could, if they play like they have out of the gate, they could run away with that league.
3 losses already for the defending national champions. You mentioned they lost on their banner hanging night to UMass Lowell, and then the sweep this past weekend. Does Scott Sandlin have to be concerned, or is it just so early in the season that you can chalk this up as just kind of finding your way?
The one thing I've learned about Scott Sandlin is he kind of takes a very good temperature of his team, and he understands the difficulty of schedules at times that they face. And right now, I don't think he's too worried. I don't think he wants to see this keep heading in a negative direction, but I also think that he doesn't have too much worry about how good this team is. He knows that he has some of the better players from last year's national championship team back, and I think he realizes this club will be fine. That said, do you tell the players that? Probably not. You go into the locker room, and I don't know what type of a shouter he is. He always seems so mild mannered to me, but you do what you have to do. You find a way to motivate, but they'll get that motivation. I think they'll be fine.
A team that had a pretty decent weekend in non-conference play was Maine. Now, Maine got the season started off, strangely enough, in a Hockey East game, getting thumped by Providence 7-0. Had a couple of wins over Alaska Anchorage, and then a split with a very good Quinnipiac team that was number 8 coming into the weekend. A 4-2 win and a close loss, 4-3. Are things turning around a little bit for the Black Bears?
Well, it depends on who shows up, whether it's Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, because I can't really tell what to expect. I can't figure out what to expect from this Maine team right now. I mean, obviously, I saw the game, the 7-0 loss, and nothing looked good. Their defense was all over the place. Then they get home, and you get that Alaska Anchorage team in there. I think everybody knows that's a team that might struggle for much of the season. So you didn't know how much to put into those 2 victories. But then you go on the road to Quinnipiac. That is not an easy place to play. And tough game. They got out to a lead. They had to kind of hold on, bounce back from and respond to Quinnipiac goals. But right now, Edwards Trailmax, he's got 6 goals on the season. He seems to be kind of pacing that offense. Everything he's doing right now is pretty good. If they think he's had 6 goals in 5 games, and they got shut out in one of those games. So, everything that they seem to be doing is improved, and that's a great sign for a team. And Red Gendron, the head coach up there, probably feels good. I'm sure he would have liked to have gotten 3 points out of the weekend instead of a split, but Quinnipiac, we know, is going to be a very good team. I expect them to be one of the top 3 teams in the ECAC, top 10 in the nation for much of the season. Just getting 2 points down there, that's a pretty big positive.
Back into Hockey East action with one game this weekend, and then that's against Vermont, and then a home series with Boston University and BU over the weekend, showing that they are vulnerable. So maybe a chance for Maine to get some momentum.
Yeah, who knows? I think each individual weekend plays itself out. And sometimes, depending on the coach and their ability to work between games, sometimes it can be each individual game. But I almost feel like you do see a different identity of teams weekend to weekend. And BU, you mentioned, I think they got 1 out of 4 points against Northern Michigan this week, and they blew a 4-1 lead on Friday night. Nearly lost that game in overtime, and to think that they could have been swept in that weekend is rather scary. But it's still college hockey, it's still college athletics, and I feel like sometimes it's hard for teams to motivate themselves. It's hard for teams to believe that they're facing a difficult opponent when they think that they're facing a cupcake, and that bites you in the rear end too often. So we'll see where BU goes, but Maine, I don't think they feel like there's any easy games ahead of them. They know that every game is going to be a challenge.
We've got more to come on USCHO Weekend Review, including Providence, Bowling Green, Holy Cross, a big crowd for RIT, and a weird pair of games for Alaska and Penn State, here on USCHO Weekend Review.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Providence took a trip to the ECAC North Country, a trip that is a difficult one for members of that league, but they came away with a pair of victories over St. Lawrence and Clarkson.
Yeah, and that was a good bounce back for Providence. Obviously, we mentioned a really good start for them, a 7-0 win over Maine, but then a loss at home to Holy Cross in overtime, and you got to kind of sit around and let that fester for a while, and then you get on the bus, and it's a long bus ride up to St. Lawrence and Clarkson. They came out strong. They thumped St. Lawrence on the first night. I believe it was a 6-0 shutout, and then Clarkson, we know Clarkson is a very good team. They handed them a loss on home ice, and that's the way you need to respond. And, I last segment, I was kind of talking about how teams can be different week to week. And that means that Nate Lehman was able to get into his players' heads that, we didn't respect an opponent, maybe a Holy Cross. We didn't play as well as we know we can. We can't do that too often. And they certainly didn't this weekend. They did a great job of making sure that they thought they were taking on 2 very hard teams, played very good hockey over both nights, and they come away with 2 victories. And that's kind of the sign of a coach that I like, a coach that can find a way to refocus and remotivate his team when needed.
You mentioned maybe not having enough respect. I don't think that any team should ever be in that situation in Division I anymore. As we see results, and some of them that we're going through upsets are barely upsets anymore because of the parity and things. In fact, one of the things we have on our roster here is Holy Cross. Their competition against Hockey East, 1-1-1. Interestingly enough, that win over Providence and a loss to a not that great Merrimack team on Thursday at home, and then tying Northeastern on Saturday night. They're part of what is an improved, still not great, but an improved out-of-conference record for Atlantic hockey that could help that league get a second team in the NCAAs if they can keep about this level of play. Yeah,
I like what Holy Cross has done. They've taken on some pretty good teams right out of the gate. I think they'd probably like to have that Merrimack game back. They kind of controlled that game, but did not find ways to score. That was one of the nights that you can look at 2 great wins that a win and a tie against Providence and Northeastern that not a lot of people expected them to get. But I think I had a high expectation that they could beat Merrimack because they are a good enough team. They just didn't play well that night. But going back to Atlantic hockey, I think it's still a stretch. The way the pairwise are written and the way the RPI is built, they're going to have a really good non-league schedule, for the rest of the season. They're not that far down as compared to many other years. But, at one point this season, I think it was about a week and a half ago, they were a 500 team out of conference. They've slowly dropped from that. And right now, just a 333 winning percentage. I think to get that second team in, they probably have to get their winning percentage up to the high 400s, like 480 as an out-of-conference winning percentage. That then allows you to maybe have a couple of teams do very, very well within your league schedule, where, as we've mentioned before, everybody cancels themselves out because they all play 500 when you tally the whole league up. But you can then kind of throw in the thought that maybe there becomes some bottom feeders in the league, and that you can just get you can accumulate a lot of wins off the bottom of the league. I just don't see that in Atlantic hockey right now. I feel like top to bottom, whoever that lowest team is in the league is still going to have a shot to be, to beat the first seed or the first place team, because that's just how strong the parity is. So in a way, parity kind of can hurt the league in terms of in terms of the hopes of getting that second NCAA team, because there just isn't somebody putting up 2 or 3 losses within their league and then, going, 2-8 out of the league, whatever the actual numbers are. I can't remember the number of non-league games they play. But sometimes you can just have such a great league record and then you just get a couple of other wins outside of the league and you're fine. So I don't know that I see that, but you never know what happens if Atlantic hockey can go on a bit of a tear here. And get 10 or 11 more non-conference wins, they're certainly going to be competitive.
One team that has done its job on non-conference wins in Atlantic hockey is RIT. They've played 4 of their 8 non-conference games. They're 3-1 in those, and one of those was on Saturday night, a 4-0 shutout of visiting Merrimack, just shy of a sellout at the AHL Blue Cross Arena, 9,805, about 700 shy of being sold out. A strong win for the Tigers, and also a game at which they announced officially that next year's opponent at that homecoming game is going to be Notre Dame. Sellout will be no problem next year.
Yeah, certainly it'll be no problem to sell that building out when you get Notre Dame in there. But, a very good win to get a win against a Hockey East opponent for RIT. And they've been strong out of the gate here. And that's, you got to kind of remember, if you're going to build an NCAA tournament resume, it starts getting built in October, and you don't want to, find yourself, sitting there, 1-7 in non-league games as you head into your league schedule, and then you almost have to feel like you have to be perfect in the league. This is a nice little start for RIT. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on them throughout the year, see how they do. But I like the fact that they were able to come out so strong out of the gates, and they took care of business against a Merrimack team that I'm not sure exactly how strong they are comparatively. And as you said, they used their speed against Merrimack. They made Merrimack look slow. And that's something that if you have that ability, you might as well use it. And that a 4-0 shutout in front of a big crowd. I just love that game for college hockey. To put 10,000 fans, or in this case, just short of 10,000 fans in any arena that's not in North Dakota is impressive.
Well, one of those RIT wins was against Bowling Green, and that set up 3 games in a row for the Falcons against Western Michigan. Bowling Green lost 5-2 in the consolation of the Icebreaker tournament, but in a home-and-home series took a pair against what I think is a very good Western Michigan team.
Yeah, and they did it with defense and goaltending. They found ways to score goals, but then to only allow a single goal in each of those games. That's very impressive, and that's exactly I think what you knew that Bowling Green had the ability to do. Now they've actually gone out and done it. So I'm impressed by that sweep. I think after you came back from the Icebreaker and we were kind of talking, you said, "Wow, Western Michigan is by far the best team." I kind of was thinking that this might be a long weekend for Bowling Green and a tough start. The fact that they could start out, in these 2 weekends, be 0-3-1 wouldn't have been a big positive. Instead, though, here they are. They end up going 2-0 on the weekend. They earn that sweep, and they're heading the right direction. Western, they're probably going to want to regroup, but I think that Andy Murray knows what his team's abilities are. The only thing is they're going to play in the NCHC, and that's where a league where I still say there's just not an easy night, and they'll find their ways to win games. We'll see where they end up at the end of the year. It's going to be it's a tough year a tough league anytime you're playing in it. You've just got to make sure that you find a way to not take a single night off. And if you do, then you're going to end up finding 2 losses, at the end of your weekends.
One last series to mention, Alaska at Penn State. Alaska getting drubbed 7-0 on Thursday night in that Thursday-Friday series. But then an uncharacteristic shutout of Penn State, a 4-0 win for Alaska on Friday night. Guy Godowski was not happy with his Nittany Lions, and the players had a players-only meeting after that game. Probably a little bit of a wake-up call for a team I expect to be right near the top, and the preseason favorite of the coaches to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, a little bit of a strange game, I guess. When you thump a team 7-0 one night, then you come back and it does seem that their power play failed them that night. They were 0 for 4, but they had a 5-minute major in there. There were a lot of penalties in that game. The biggest factor, I think, though, became discipline for them late. You're down again. I believe they were down 2-0, and then they just kept taking penalties after penalties. And Alaska wasn't able to convert. They still ended up 0 for 7 on the power plays. But I think it was 5 out of the game's final 7 penalties were called against Penn State. And when you're trailing, you just can't spend the whole time killing penalties. So, this is Guy Godowski. We know what he gets out of his team. And it sounds like if it was a players only meeting, it sounds like the players understood what some of the issues were coming out of that game. I'm sure discipline was something that was talked about in that post game meeting. But credit to Alaska. We've been talking about Alaska and the fact that they're probably a lot better team than a lot of people expected them to be this season. You didn't like the 7-0, drubbing that you took on night 1, but what a way to respond and find a way to get a 4-0 win on the road in a tough building. And I think you and I were even talking about it. I didn't look at the attendances, but I always thought that Friday, if you play a Thursday-Friday series at Penn State, Friday tends to be the tougher night. Thursday, I think they do some football rallies and stuff like that, and not a lot of focus is on hockey on Thursday. But Friday nights, the focus is on hockey. So if that's the night you take the win, that's a pretty impressive win.
And that's not a friendly building to play in. They built it specifically to be intimidating. You have the student section. I don't know how they built it so steeply and met code, but they found a way to do it. You have this wall of noisy students right behind the visiting goalie in the first and third period, and a volume in there that exceeds 100 decibels, and I don't know how they do that either, but it is just a very difficult place to go into.
Yeah, I haven't been there since their first full season as Division I, and at that point, obviously the team was not the team they are today. They were a decent team, but competitive. But it's a little bit different nowadays, and that still the explosive sound that came from that place on a goal was pretty incredible. So yeah, it's a good atmosphere. It's one of college hockey's better atmospheres, and for such a new school, that's a nice little feather in the cap.
Well, we're just about out of time for this edition of USCHO Weekend Review. We also have USCHO Spotlight early in the week, and later in the week, the USCHO Game of the Week podcast. Subscribe to all three. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen to back episodes or to subscribe. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.